He came to town with nothing and chose a rusty old train car to call home. The townspeople judged him, and the council demanded he be removed as an unwanted presence. But what he built inside stunned even the most skeptical, and one boy's voice changed everything. But just wait until you hear the twist that turned this drama on its head, and how justice finally won. When Terrence Collins arrived in Brookville, Mississippi, it was impossible not to notice. He didn't come with noise or fanfare, no car, no suitcase, just a worn-out backpack slung over one shoulder and an old, squeaky shopping cart filled with what looked like rusty tools and bits of scrap metal. He didn't stop in town, didn't talk to anyone, didn't ask for help. He walked with quiet purpose down the cracked sidewalk, past the convenience store, past the diner where regulars paused mid-bite to stare, and then across the railroad tracks, the unofficial line between Old Brookville and the forgotten stretch of land no one wanted to talk about. There, nestled in overgrown weeds and graffiti-stained concrete, sat a decaying freight car, long out of service, half sunk into the ground like a buried memory. Terrence stepped inside and stayed. By nightfall, the town was buzzing. A few said he must be harmless, probably just eccentric. Others weren't so kind. He's not right in the head. Probably hiding from something. Who moves into a train car unless they've lost everything? No one actually spoke to him. They just watched from porches, whispered behind curtains, or lowered their voices when passing by. The freight car had been empty for years. Suddenly, it felt like a threat. Even the kids were warned, don't go near that place, don't talk to him. But not all listened. 8-year-old Max, curious and unafraid, rode his bike by one afternoon and glanced inside. What he saw didn't match the stories. There was no chaos, no mess, just a man gently sweeping the dusty floor, moving with a kind of quiet focus, like someone tending a sacred space. A few days later, a neighbor called the police. She said he was making strange noises. The officers showed up. They found Terrence humming softly to himself, old jazz standards, barely above a whisper. They asked him a few questions. He answered politely, calmly. No trouble, no harm done. Still, the warning came. We've had complaints. Just keep it quiet. One more call and we'll have to move you. Terrence nodded, thanked them, and returned to what he was doing, carefully sanding a broken piece of wood near the open door. No one asked where he'd come from. No one wondered why he'd chosen that place. They had already made up their minds. To them, he was just a stranger in a metal box, and that was all they needed to judge. Days turned into weeks. The freight car didn't move, and neither did Terrence. But something else began to shift, not in him, but in the town. At first, there was tension. One night, a group of teenagers crept toward the rail yard, whispering plans and egging each other on. But whatever they expected, it wasn't what they found. They came back home unusually quiet. No one spoke about what happened, but they didn't go back. And soon, a new rumor began to circle. Don't mess with that guy. He's not what you think. Then came the changes. Small things, easy to miss if you weren't looking, but impossible to ignore once you saw them. On the edge of the gravel, near the open train car door, someone had arranged a row of handmade wooden planters filled with blooming wildflowers. Not store-bought, grown from seed. Next to them, a sculpture emerged, welded from old bolts, pipe fragments, and a bent piece of rail. Somehow, impossibly, it looked like an angel, wings outstretched, arms open. And then, one morning, a sign appeared. Painted on reclaimed wood in neat, elegant script, "Welcome. Respect the space." That was when curiosity began to outweigh suspicion. Sarah Jenkins, a local schoolteacher and Mac's mother, had seen Terrence from afar, always quiet, always working. Something about him reminded her of her own father, same posture, same patience in the hands. On a gray, rainy afternoon, she walked across the tracks holding a warm container of homemade soup. Terrence greeted her with a gentle nod, and the kind of smile that made you feel seen. They didn't speak much. He simply thanked her, and she turned to leave. But something, a quiet pull, made her glance back toward the open door of the freight car. and she looked inside. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. It wasn't what anyone could have imagined. The once dark car had been transformed. The floor was smooth and shining, polished with care. The walls, lined with books, stacked in careful rows, philosophy, history, poetry, even children's stories. Recycled furniture stood proudly, restored with patience, each piece telling its own quiet story. A handmade lantern cast a warm glow. In the corner, a pot of stew simmered on a stove, made from an oil drum, sending up a soft, comforting scent that clashed completely with the cold, gray rain outside. And then she saw the mural. Covering the back wall was a hand-painted tribute. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, their faces full of strength, framed in color and light. And between them, bold and clear, were the words, "This is not where I ended. This is where I begin." Sarah stood in silence. She didn't cry, but something shifted inside her, the way a tightly closed door creaks open for the first time in years. She walked back home slowly, soup container empty, her mind full. That night, she told Max what she'd seen. And the next morning, he asked if they could go back, not out of curiosity, but out of respect. Because now it wasn't just a man in a metal box. It was something else entirely, something sacred. And suddenly, everyone who passed by began to feel it too. It didn't happen all at once. Sarah didn't pry. She just showed up now and then, sometimes with soup, sometimes with silence. And over time, Terrence began to share pieces of the life he never expected to explain again. He used to be someone else, a high school art teacher in Baton Rouge, the kind of teacher whose classroom stayed open during lunch so kids could finish their projects, the kind who showed up early to hang student paintings in the hallway before anyone saw, respected, even admired. Then life turned, quietly, then suddenly. His wife Lillian was the light in his world, a school nurse with a soft laugh and a fierce belief in second chances. When she fell ill, Terrence did everything he could, but cancer doesn't bargain. When she passed, something in him changed. Not in a dramatic way, more like a string that had always held him upright just snapped. The spark he used to bring into his classroom dimmed. His routine slipped, and eventually, so did everything else. He made a few mistakes, some worse than others. There was one night he never forgot, one that cost him his job. After that, it all unraveled. Without work, the bills mounted. Without his wife, the house felt hollow. And before he knew it, the only thing left was the road. People didn't look at him and see the man he'd been. They saw the result, not the reason. They didn't ask what he'd lost, only how low he'd fallen. For 6 years he wandered. Shelters, bus stops, long walks between cities where no one remembered his name. Until one cold morning, he met an old railroad worker near Meridian, a quiet man who offered no pity, just a place to sleep. An empty freight car. Sometimes, the man said, you don't need a roof, you need a reason. Terrence remembered that. So when he found the abandoned car outside Brookville, he didn't see it as metal and rust. He saw possibility. He brought in broken wood and polished it, collected books from dumpsters and libraries, welded forgotten metal into shape. And somewhere between the sanding, the painting, and the planting, the train car became something more. It became his studio, his classroom, his sanctuary. Not once did he ask for help. Not once did he put out a sign saying, "I need." He didn't want to be saved. He just wanted to be left in peace, to build something beautiful out of the wreckage. But not everyone saw it that way. The more people started visiting, the more whispers began. The town council called an emergency meeting. There were concerns about zoning, about unauthorized structures, about safety hazards. They never spoke to Terrence directly. They just left a folded paper near the sculpture.
Notice of removal. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises. No explanation, no conversation. Just an expiration date. And for the second time in his life, something he built with love was being taken away.
That night, the town exhaled, and something in the air changed. Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the mural, about the books, about the silence that had lived inside that train car, and how it now spoke louder than any speech. So she did what people do in moments like this. She took out her phone. She uploaded the photos she'd taken that day, the floor, the shelves, the sculpture, the words on the wall, and she wrote just one line. This man built beauty out of nothing. Now they want to take it away. She hit post. By midnight, the image had begun to spread. By morning, it had gone everywhere. People from across the country saw what Terrence had built. Teachers, artists, veterans, students all commented the same thing. Let him stay. Protect this space. This isn't just a story. This is who we want to be. Max's dad, who ran a small contracting business, made a public offer. I'll reinforce the structure myself, no charge. You don't tear down art, you protect it. Local teens, the same ones who once mocked or feared the freight car, now stood outside it with paintbrushes and plywood, making signs that read, "Let Terrence stay. This is not where he ends." The mayor's office was overwhelmed. The council's inbox filled up. Calls came in from out of state. Even a local news crew set up near the tracks. An emergency hearing was scheduled, and for the first time, Terrence's name was on the docket. He didn't ask to speak, but someone else did. It was Max. He stood up on his small feet, held a printed photo of the mural, and said, without a tremble in his voice, "Mr. Collins taught me more about dignity than any classroom ever did. He made something beautiful, and he didn't ask anyone for help. We should be learning from him, not kicking him out." The room went still. No one spoke for a long time. Then, the oldest member of the council leaned forward and said quietly, "Let's do better than we did." And just like that, the eviction was canceled. But more than that, something extraordinary happened. The town council voted unanimously to turn the freight car into a permanent community art space, funded, supported, protected. And they asked Terrence if he would serve as its first art director and mentor. He didn't answer right away. That evening, he walked alone back into the train car, sat beneath the mural he'd painted with his own hands, listened to the wind move through the cracks in the steel. And then, for the first time in years, he let the tears fall. Not from sadness, but from something far rarer. He had finally been seen. And the town that once crossed the street to avoid him, now they crossed the tracks to shake his hand. They no longer called him stranger. They called him teacher. Some, the lucky ones, even called him friend. Because sometimes the people the world ignores the most turn out to be the very ones who show us what it means to be human.